Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Hey everyone, and welcome to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by Ella Massell, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Dina Sargeant. Let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Now, there are a ton of factors such as family dynamics, upbringing, and also parental influence that impact the political and social beliefs of emerging adults. Whether you're a parent, educator, or simply curious about human development, we're going to be looking into how anyone can use that to improve or broaden a child's understanding and importance in the world. To help give me an expansive viewpoint is renowned applied developmental psychologist, Dr. Deborah Heiser. Thank you so much for joining me, Deborah.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Now, to start us off, how would you describe your day-to-day as an applied developmental psychologist?
Well, I teach at a university in the mornings at 8 a.m., 4 days a week. And I also run a nonprofit called the Mentor Project. So when I get out of my teaching role, I'm in an administrative role running a nonprofit all day long. And I also see clients on the side. So my day-to-day is filled with a lot of administrative work and broken up with some amazing, more interpersonal experiences when I teach and when I'm coaching.
Okay. And what is the role of a applied developmental psychologist? Because when you talk about psychologists, there's sort of a different extent to what a normal psychologist would do. There's also another aspect to it as well.
Sure. So I was trained so that I could either see clients, who are presenting with pathology. I was able to do that through my program, or follow the normal path of a developmental psychologist, which is to look at what we should expect through our lifespan. It's sort of looking at the norms, whereas most people think of a clinical psychologist, and a clinical psychologist is looking at anything that is something that we shouldn't expect, as something abnormal that comes along, pathology. And I really do focus on all of the things that we have to look forward to as we go through life.
Okay. And now from your work, what is the most common frustration that parents sort of claim when trying to get their children interested in sociopolitical understanding and have that ground for making their own decisions as an adult?
What I can tell you is that, most people think that there is a real part of parenting that comes into play with regard to sociopolitical thoughts and ideas. And the thoughts are that you have to come in with some kind of manualized way to do it. Mm-hmm. And really, there's a saying in psychology that you just have to be good enough. And with regard to parenting, that is also the case. So what I'm seeing is a lot of people who are frustrated and feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't have the magic elixir for parenting my child through their teen years, especially, or preteen years when they're finding their identity. And that's really a frustration that I'm seeing. It isn't as much the media or anything like that. It's more of, and understandably so, someone saying, how do I do this? I want to be the best at what I can do in terms of imparting whatever the information is I want to my offspring. Really, we just have to think of ourselves as good enough. We don't have to be searching for gold stars and doing that.
Especially because gold stars are not something adults are really set to do. It's like, oh, I taught my child this. Okay, I get a gold star. So that's, especially when it comes to building as a young adult, I've sort of gone to the aspect of, now I'm 25, but when I was 21, sort of dealing with, okay, the reality of what it is to be an adult. And I know as a teenager, I couldn't wait to be like, oh, I can't wait to make my own decisions. I can't wait to say when I get to come home, how long I get to stay out for. But the minute that those decisions became something that I could do, I did not feel equipped enough to be able to make those decisions myself as well. Like being 21, I still called my mom or my dad and be like, should I get food at uni or should I come home and eat lunch? Like, is there something that I should do beforehand? Should I do my uni work at uni after class or should I just come home and go do it there? So I did not feel equipped enough to have those understandings of what to do on my day-to-day, let alone how to vote or what's important to be aware of when voting. So the whole aspect of like voting when you're 18 and in Australia as well is compulsory to vote. So it sort of adds to that need of, okay, you're actually having to pay attention. The minute that you become 18, that's it, you're having to do it. So it's such an interesting aspect to allow that kind of maturity for a child to sort of be. And I think for the first couple of years, I just voted for whatever my dad picked. I'm like, okay, so dad, what are you clicking? I'll click the same thing because I didn't know any better at that time. So it was so interesting to know a little bit deeper into the show today as to how parents can sort of equip their child well enough to when they get to that age, they're able to make those decisions.
So, yeah, there are ways. And I think that to sort of, if we're going to give some ideas on what a person can do to equip or guide the next generation, most of it is realizing that when people are teenagers, 18, getting ready to vote, they're in the identity stage of life. That's where everybody's trying on a whole lot of different hats. What do I think? What do I feel? Who are my friends? What do I want to be? What do I want to do? As you gave a great example, what do I want to do for lunch? It is really and truly, that is a typical example. And the example that you gave of your parents, they were there as support, right? You really weren't looking to have them answer for you what you should do for lunch. You were saying, I'd just like some support. I need this. I need to touch base with my parents. That's typical. That's great. And your parents were doing a good enough job because you kept going back to them for more. So that's really what you should expect. Transition is a time that is not supposed to be comfortable. Good times of transition are not comfortable even. All of the things that we look forward to in life, if you think about going to a university, getting married, buying a house, buying a car, all of those things, having a child, are filled with times of indecision, right? You don't go in and you say, I'm ready to check a box. You say, what do I do? Am I doing it right? Am I making sure that I'm reviewing everything that I need to review? How do I really feel and think about this? So when we think about anything sociopolitical, the same thing is going to be happening with teens. And the real thing that we have to think about is, how can a parent be a support so that their child can put on a bunch of different hats? And if they put one on that we feel is different than the one we have on, that we don't say to ourselves, oh my gosh, that's it. Our parenting was terrible and our child has a different viewpoint than we have. We should be realizing that they will be trying on different ideas, making friends that have different viewpoints than the family. That's what they're supposed to be doing in the teen years, is really finding out who they are and exploring.
Okay. And before we go even deeper into this, I would love to get to know some of your interests and maybe some recommendations when it comes to these different topics, and hopefully get us warmed up to answer even deeper questions towards the end of the show. Now, to start off with, do you have a favorite book that you could recommend to us?
I love to go back to good old Marie Curie. I loved Marie Curie, and I still do. Mm-hmm. I love a powerful woman who does a lot throughout her whole lifespan.
Oh, that's perfect. What specifically about her do you really love reading about?
Well, I loved the book when I was a kid, and it was an inspirational book for me because she did things that broke the barriers of what typical women did at a time when women weren't becoming scientists. And she rose to the top of her field. She got married and was still able to be doing things that typical women weren't striving to do, and have children. She was able to really do it all. She was doing work-life balance things before anybody was. I just really liked that when I was a teenager reading about her, and it still resonates.
Oh, perfect. Now, when it comes to movies, do you have a movie that you've enjoyed recently?
We tend to do streaming in our household. I don't go out to the movies as often. So we finished Suits. We're, watching Peaky Blinders. We just started that like 2 days ago. So we're really into streaming.
Okay, no, I love Peaky Blinders, and I did love Suits as well. So I can definitely relate to a bunch of that. Yeah, my family is a big streaming one. I think I'm the only one that likes going out to the movies as often as I can. But my whole family, just when it comes to Netflix, that's it. That's movie night for us.
Exactly. Same here.
Now, are you listening to any podcasts that you could recommend to us?
Oh, I love podcasts. So I love Adam Grant's Work Life. I don't know if you've ever heard of his podcast. And I've always liked, he's an organizational psychologist. So I just love to follow what he does. And How I Built This is also a great one that I listen to all the time.
Okay. Oh, no, that sounds really interesting. So what about those podcasts really stand out for you?
Well, first of all, Adam Grant's is based on research. He's a professor of psychology at UPenn, and and it applies to work. And he really talks about concepts that he's able to broaden and make really useful information out of research that's done. He's very creative in the work that he does.
Okay. Perfect. No, that sounds really interesting. It's amazing when you can sort of listen to a podcast and have all that knowledge basically at the tip of your fingers, and just sort of know that you're really learning something. And I think that's a great movement when it comes to podcasts as well, where you're able to have that time to, whether it's an hour and you're sitting there for an hour listening to it, and you can really actually learn something from it.
Yes, and it feels like you're not learning.
Yeah, exactly. You're not sitting there with a textbook having to force yourself to sit down and read it.
Exactly. Who wants a podcast like that?
No, they're just reading like a bedtime story now.
Yeah, exactly.
So either in your professional or personal life, do you have a role model, or maybe a person that you find yourself looking up to?
Oh, yeah, I have a lot. Throughout my whole life, I've had a lot of role models. I'd say that right now I have several role models. There are people who are on the board of the organization that I run. And so they're all people who are teaching me all the time. And I'm trying to, really strive to be like a lot of them are. And a lot of the mentors too. They're all role models for me to try to achieve more than I have now and make fun while I'm doing it like they do.
Yeah. I think that's a great thing about having the academics around you as well, having people who know a lot more, because you find yourself really learning into it and really finding a deeper understanding into why you're interested in it as well. It builds up that understanding of, okay, they're interested in it because of this. I find that interesting, so I'm going to follow along that. And you never even realize that you were ever interested in it until they even had to mention it.
Absolutely. Having a role model, like you just mentioned, it really does make you, it makes you aware all of the time how much you can keep improving, even if you're already having fun and thinking you're doing well. And that's exciting to me.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I hope you're all warmed up to answer even deeper questions into what we're talking about today.
Absolutely.
I know that everyone has a very different definition as to what parenting is and what the role of a parent should be. Either professionally or personally, do you have a definition for you of what parenting is?
Yeah, parenting really is trying to make sure that when you have a child, that their basic needs are met, that they're safe, that they're fed, all of the things that they need. But beyond that, that we are helping them to become individuals who feel good about themselves, that they have self-esteem, that they feel like they're confident, and they're able to be independent thinking adults who are going to go out and capitalize on all of the information that they've taken in from their parents to do good in the world.
So what do you think expectant parents should be aware of in their transition to parenthood?
Oh boy, this one is interesting because I lived it, right? I'm a parent. And prior to being a parent, I had all of these ideas. I was going to eat organic while I was pregnant. And I really had it down. And I was no different than anybody else who had every idea thought out. I was a good box checker. Mm-hmm. And then when I was pregnant, I got really sick. A lot, some people have that. It's just something that some people get very sick. I could hardly hold anything down. So organic went out the window. Everything else that I thought of went out the window. And I just had to make sure I could just get in enough calories and substance to get through the day and to make sure I had enough for the growing baby. And it really did solidify all of the advice that had been given to me before, which is all we have to do is be good enough. Mm-hmm. I was good enough while I was pregnant, so I was able to have a healthy baby. I did what I had to do in order to have the healthy baby. Parents really, when they're becoming parents, there's a lot of excitement, but also pressure. Just like if you're planning a wedding and you want every detail to be perfect, we can fall into the same trap with parenting. I'm going to have the right seat. I'm going to have the right everything. I'm going to have all the right music, the right books, the right everything. And if we can remove the right out of it and have the good enough in it, it makes it much more enjoyable for the parents and takes the anxiety and stress away from the children as well. As they come into the world, that there's all sorts of expectations on them from the parents.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I feel like I have a lot of friends who recently had kids, and they had a whole list of plans that they wanted to do when they were pregnant, when they were going through the pregnancy, or even when they were planning to have a child. And then the minute they became pregnant, the minute some of them became a parent, all those ideas were like, okay, I think I may have stumbled upon too many things to be able to prepare for.
Because it can be endless.
Yeah, exactly. She was like, oh, I'm going to go and do baby shopping while I'm pregnant. And she's like eight months pregnant. She's like, I can barely walk when I get there. Like I can barely move, and without the freak out of me tripping over and knocking into everything and being aware of like small, tiny stores at the moment. And so whole idea of like, I think she had to end up getting her partner to go and build the nursery at that point, because it was like, I cannot even stand long enough to be able to hang anything up. And it's very different to how you see it in the movie as well. Like you see a mother 8 months pregnant and like sticky taping stuff to the ceiling or putting nails in the wall, climbing a ladder. And in reality, there's like, you can't even get that far. You can't even get 1 foot up the ladder before you end up wanting to sit down.
It's so true. I remember, feeling such a letdown at the time because, as you mentioned, media portrays pregnant women as being beautiful and glowy, and they have these perfect little basketballs and as a stomach. And I was so sick that I looked terrible. I didn't get those compliments that some people get that, oh, you glowing pregnant person. I look, completely sick. And so, I think that for each parent as they prepare for parenthood, and I'm going to say this, and I'm sure other people are going to fall into the same trap I did, which is they're going to come in with their expectations. But if anyone can hear this and not fall into that trap, the best thing is to just look forward to all of the amazing times that you're going to have with your child. And those will not include the color of the nursery, and they won't include, any of the fancy, decorations that you may be thinking are part of all of that and the outfits that they're wearing. Just get excited to, smell the baby and experience the baby and all of the things that go with it, which are truly bonding experiences for both.
Mm-hmm. And now I would love to stay and talk about babies the whole episode. I know that we're looking into a little bit older, a little bit of a different life stage and a whole other challenge for a lot of parents to deal with. Now, can you provide a little bit of an overview of the concept for parent socialization and its significance in the development of young adults?
Yes. So socialization is huge. And I will move from babies, but part of it is that, that begins really young. And that is when we look at babies, when we start to talk to babies, when, we use words, it starts really young and we don't even think about it. But sometimes, when a baby points, we don't say something like, what would you like? And start a dialogue. So starting dialogues early is really important. So when kids become, the age where they start to express their independence, and independence in thinking and independence with friends, that's usually, middle school age, like around preteen, especially teenage years. We want to be able to have kids already used to having dialogues with us and socializing. And so if we're doing that throughout and at a young age, it usually continues.
Mm-hmm. And how does parental socialization really influence sociopolitical attitudes in young adults?
So kids are really influenced by their parents, right? Little kids. They all, when they go to school, they say, oh my gosh, my mom said this, my dad said this. Then they lose that and parents become less cool. And they start to really get influenced by things outside of the home. And that's really developmentally what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to trust enough to move beyond each layered circle within our environment and we start to, look to our peers and look to social media and look to our environment outside, which is our classmates and everyone else. So in terms of continuing dialogue, when our kids don't want to dialogue so much with us, some of the main things that we can do is I used to catch it while I could. Mm-hmm. And that was, I decided I was going to drive my kids and all of their friends wherever I could. And that meant they were trapped in a car with me, and so they would talk amongst themselves, the kids, and I would then get to hear what they were saying. And because they'd forget I was there. Mm-hmm. But that gave me a window into what they were thinking and feeling and how they were thinking about it. And I could chime in on occasion. And so getting any opportunity that you can with your kids to talk with them in their preteen years is really important, because they're not going to just come in and oftentimes and say, hey, let me tell you how I'm thinking about what's going on in the world. One other thing that we can be doing is that we can be talking about what's going on in the world in the way that we want them to hear it, which is another important thing.
Mm-hmm. So are there any misconceptions that sort of can arise when you're talking about building that sociopolitical understanding in not just a young adult? I think we're now talking about teenagers as well. Like, are there any misconceptions about how parents think that strategies will work, or some strategies that work that when reality just does more harm than good?
Yes. I think a lot of parents say, I want my child to be an independent thinker, but that independent thinking should be just like mine. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like hoping for like a robot child in a way. And we, this isn't an unusual thing. This is because we want them to, we've seen this works for us. We don't want them to go down a hard path. It's not like a parent saying, I am going to influence my child in some way. But the path that we can get trapped in is thinking that if our child expresses something different from us, that A, we've lost them in terms of they're going off the deep end in some different kind of thinking. Because there are two things with that. A, kids like to push buttons. They like to try new things. They like to express themselves. And whatever response we give, they're going to pick up on. But the other thing is to end up dialoguing. If they say, this is what I think, say, well, tell me about that. And then you have the opportunity to express how you're thinking and feeling about it. And truly, usually the core values, whatever is core in the home, the traditions are maintained. They may be expressing, oh, I like, this political way of thinking versus another, but usually the core values remain the same. And people forget that.
Okay. So there's a lot. So when you're saying that a lot of kids can be influenced by their friends, can that also mean the sociopolitical understanding as well can be influenced by what they see their friends doing, or being like, okay, this friend group believes this, so I suddenly have to go ahead and believe this as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, think of any kid who's like 12, 13 and older, especially when they're 12 or 13. All they want to do is be just like their friends. So if there is a friend that comes in and they're the one, they are somebody that kids look up to, and they're talking about something, that is sociopolitical, whatever it is, sociocultural, kids will grab onto that and they'll try it on. They'll say, let me see how this is. Things shake out when people are preteens and teens, and they switch their friend groups a little, they tweak it, they move around a little bit. So they're going to be trying on new things throughout that period of time. And yes, they are influenced by it. And yes, they are influenced by social media. And that can be a big play in it. So parents might say, wow, my kids were really, sort of parroting what I was saying, and it changed. And that's not something to become afraid of.
So beyond the parental socialization and beyond sort of the conversations that you have with your teenagers or young adults, how influential are parents in shaping that sort of sociopolitical attitude of their teenager or of their young adult? And how are they able to do that even without saying anything? Are they able to do it without having those conversations?
Oh, of course. If we look at mentorship, parents are really mentors. We're modeling everything for our kids. So, if kids hear cursing in the home or yelling in the home, they might feel more comfortable cursing or yelling, those sorts of things. The same as with modeling anything else, thoughts and beliefs and things like that. It becomes more comfortable for people when they hear that. So, yes, there are different ways that we can model it. One is that, going out and voting, talking about that, talking about candidates and people that we're thinking about, talking about ways in which we think that people are doing good or not doing good, or have the potential to do the things that we would like in terms of politics. Being exposed to those sorts of things is a form of mentorship and modeling that we do all the time with our kids. If we're a family that doesn't talk at all about it, that's modeling. If we're a family that doesn't talk about what's going on in the news, that's modeling. Conversely, if we're a family that says, hey, I heard this on the news, I was shocked and amazed, or wow, this is great, or this is terrible, I don't like this at all, or how do you think this will affect our community? Those are the kinds of things that are models for kids. And we often think that modeling just has to be in terms of the structure of something in a structured way, but it's really just living our lives. And that's how we're going to be modeling for our kids.
Okay. And how much is a child's sociopolitical understanding more of their own values, but also the parents? Like, for example, if you're sort of going, okay, the parents sort of saying something bad about one political thing or one political conversation, the child has either that option of, okay, believing what the parent says, or being like, okay, but that's wrong. So how much of that is their own moral and their own belief and their own sort of attitude to certain things, and how much of it is influenced by a parent?
As we get older, we're more influenced by our peers. I'm going to give you an example. So I have 2 children, and we live in a neighborhood where you have optional schools to go to. Schools are very different. One child, that my children are a year apart. One child chose one school and the other chose the other. And my husband and I have very clear, beliefs on the way that we operate and the way that we model. And our kids really did parrot everything that we said, just like they should when they're little. That's what kids do. Then they went off to middle school, which is, they were like 10, 11, 12, 13. And when they went off to school, one maintained the same sort of way of feeling, and the other one didn't. He differed. He went in a completely different direction. Both of their core values are the same. They're their core values, but one decided, I like this way better. And he can articulate why and how he thinks that. His friend group has a whole different sort of background, a way that they look at things, because it's 2 different schools with 2 different sort of cultures. And so that can happen all the time. So one thing that parents can do is say, if that's really important to you, maybe look at what schools your kids are going to go to, because you can really often see what the sociocultural or the political vibe is of a school. If that's really important to you, you can sort of help along where your kids are going to be educated and what groups they're going to be hanging out with just by the school that they attend.
Okay.
And the sporting groups, extracurricular activities, those sorts of things.
Okay, so there's a whole lot of things that sort of make up the child's either want or dislike to a lot of the social political situations, like especially when it comes up to voting, like what I think we were talking about earlier. Like when I was younger, there was not a whole lot of conversation on Australia voting. We've focused so much on American politics in my house, mainly because it was so fascinating. It was so vibrant. In Australia, there's 4 parties that you get to choose from and you get to vote. And I think growing up, we never really had conversations as to what those political parties dealt with, because they were always changing, or their beliefs are always changing. But because the American elections were always on the news so much, that's something that we all always had conversations about, and that's what we focused on. So when it became for the kids to vote, for us to vote, we were relating a lot of the American things to Australian things, and there was a whole lot of confusion as to, okay, Australia, we need to focus on what Australia is doing. So I basically had to go ahead and Google what each of the political parties in Australia talked about and what they stood for. But it was so different for me to actually open up that conversation with my parents, being like, okay, yes, I know we speak about that. We speak about America so often, but I still don't know what to do in Australia. I still don't know what to talk about and what to discuss. And there's that whole need of, is there occasions where children sort of bring up the need for that conversation, for the bringing up of, okay, I need you to do this a bit more?
Absolutely. So some kids live in families where the families aren't into politics. They just aren't. And so then they might ask. They might say, hey, what do you think? How do you feel? Especially teen years, or turn around to 18, it's when people are starting to say, I want to form my own identity. How do you feel and how do I feel and where does that resonate? And so that's where there might be a lot of questioning from kids, particularly if you think about it. There are a lot of traditions and things that, we feel comforted by. Think of any holiday, and you have traditions for that holiday. So we think of our parents and our families in a way that is something that we resonate with. So kids may feel very comfortable asking about that. It does not mean that they will then say, okay, now I'm on board with what you think. But they do still like to ask about that. That isn't off the table at all. When you talked about, Americans and voting and the politics here, it's hard to get 18-year-olds to vote in the United States. It's a problem here. So I don't think it's any different. I think that when you're young and you're just starting out to vote, there's a feeling of independence, but not independence. And you articulated it so well. I really want to find out what the pulse is in my own home. And I want to see what people are thinking and feeling. I don't feel adult enough yet to go out and do that on my own. So that's completely normal. That's expected.
Okay. And now when it comes to sociopolitical, there's a whole lot of stand when it comes to the influence that media has, particularly social media, especially on young adults and teenagers. What kind of, to start off with, like for people who don't know, what kind of exposure does social media or media influence on sociopolitical young adults who are sort of trying to understand it a bit more?
I don't have the data on this, but I do know that it does have a big factor. It's similar, at least, to the way peers are. And some of the things that I do know research-wise is there's the mere exposure effect. When you're exposed to certain things and you're not even really aware of it, it can still come into your way of thinking. I do know that a lot of kids get their news and they get their political information from places like TikTok and YouTube and other platforms. And that is a big factor. They're not talking with their parents as much, and they're talking about these sorts of things with their friends and going to those places for their information.
Mm-hmm. And how can parents sort of use that and have that and notice that, acknowledge that, and have that open dialogue with their teenager when it comes to the influence that social media has on what the child believes or what the young adult is set to believe?
I would dial it back a little farther because teenagers are already not going to be like, let me go check in with my parents. I want to go over what I'm watching on YouTube. They're not going to do that so much. But what we can do is prior to that, earlier on, when kids are younger, is to get kids experiencing things as much as possible. So when my kids were younger, I had them go out and work for volunteer for political parties so they could get an idea of how does it work in the behind the scenes. And then to, talk to people about what they were thinking and feeling about it. And the reason, and exposing individuals to different cultures, different people, different ideas, different thoughts is what's going to help them not to just fall into watching a YouTube video and saying, okay, I resonate. It's you then automatically have more questions about things. You automatically aren't going to just immediately buy into it. So that's where I would say if you can back it up and if parents are really interested and concerned about sociopolitical, sociocultural things, the biggest thing they can do is when their children are young is exposure, exposure, exposure. And then later it'll manifest itself into more dialogue and less just falling into following social media and friends.
Okay. So at least they have their own belief, their own understanding, their own knowledge on what their friends are saying. They can sort of counter if they disagree with a view that their friends say. At least they have those arguments that they can counter, and they can sort of say, okay, but I don't fully believe in the way that this person is handling it or the way that this argument is being said. They have that understanding, okay, this is what they see, but I don't have to follow it just because I'm friends with them.
Right. So most kids operate off of opinion. So they move from my mom said, which is the argument that kids have when they're 5 and 6, to when they go to, preteen and teen to, well, here's what I heard. And I this is something that all researchers don't like, which is, and they said, who's the they? And, can you qualify that with where you heard that? Most people can't. So what happens is they are able to say who the they are when they've been exposed to new cultures, new ideas, new perspectives. And then they can do that. It isn't just following an opinion because it sounds really plausible or like a great a great thing at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And we know, and I think we've spoken about this a little bit earlier, but not all of the child's or the young adult's opinions or views is going to be the same as the family. And that can create a lot of different dynamics, a lot of bad conversations, a lot of arguments that can take place. Now, how can parents and maybe even young adults sort of navigate the polarization of the political topics within the family that sort of foster a little bit of a respectful area of, okay, you believe this, but I believe that, without letting it get heated, without letting both objectives or both beliefs sort of be disrespected in a sense?
I think that the first thing is anytime you model a respectful conversation, that's always going to be the case. You can always do that. The other thing I like to say is the world going to end if somebody has a different opinion than you? And that's something that can help with a dialogue, because if a person really believes that their child, if they vote differently than them, is going to ruin the world, that's not going to be a dialogue that you can have that will end well. You have to be able to see that your child probably, regardless of how they're going to vote, it may change in 5 years. It probably will. You know, if they are voting different, whatever it is, you can change. We're pretty fluid in how our identity is up through like mid-20s. But the main thing is to think, do they have the same core values that we have? And the core values are often different than they are when we express our political thoughts and beliefs. So you can be in the same household with 3 different people voting differently, and they all still hold the same core beliefs. And that's why I like to think of it as, is the world going to end if somebody votes differently than you? Probably not. So you can have a dialogue, and it can be pretty friendly.
Mm-hmm. And say on another scenario of the teenager or the young adult just having no interest in politics whatsoever, how can parents sort of encourage an interest or encourage that sort of conversation, or encourage them to at least be aware of how their vote or their opinion really does affect the world, but also sort of respecting the child's boundaries, respecting their want for autonomy, their belief, saying, okay, they're not interested in this, I don't want to push them to be interested in it?
So I would say, first of all, if you will probably be able to help someone to become interested in it if that when they're very young, you start talking about it. Mm-hmm. If you are really passionate about politics and you have a child that isn't, that could be, there are a couple of things. That could be that the child is saying, part of my identity is that I'm going to be different from you, and I'm not going to be doing what you're doing. And you can say to yourself, you know what, maybe they'll come around in a few years when they're out on their own. But to give them their space, because teens are, they're like this. They are a fluid, curving set of lines that can change. So we want to, as parents, I think, just make sure that we're not trying to make robot children, that, we're trying to say, you must do this and think this and feel this. And I do this, therefore you do this. That's so much pressure on a parent. It's so much pressure on a parent. And most of the time, parents don't realize that being a good enough parent is letting our kids be who they want to be at that moment and keep modeling what you are modeling. And oftentimes that'll come around where you get close. You may start here and you end up here, or even here. You can surprise yourself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And this leads us in really well into the next section of our show, which is practice and habit. And this is something that you do as a practice, or you sort of have done in the past as a practice for your children as well. So what is a practice that you do to build or expand your child's sociopolitical understanding?
So what we have done in our household is that we exposed our kids pretty young. So by age 13, I had, one of my sons volunteering out in the community. And he didn't want to do that at first, but then afterwards, he ended up becoming volunteer of the summer. He really ended up resonating to it. And he found that he learned a lot of skills. And the other interesting thing was he did not resonate with that group that he was with, that he was working with completely. He then said, I have other ideas and other thoughts, and I could see things differently. Here's how I would run things. Here's how I would do things. I think that the way that I think that we can all work together is by getting our kids out early. I could have put mine out even earlier than that, just to take them out, to expose them, to see where it is that, where are politicians? Strangely, actually, this reminds me, my kids were even younger, except that this is, and if you follow American politics, you'll remember this. So we lived in a part of New York City where our congressman was Anthony Weiner. He's the disgraced congressman that you may have heard of. It was all over the news. But I used to take my kids to his office, and we decided to take a trip to Washington, D.C. And I said, oh, you can meet this great person. He's so terrific. And then it turned out this big scandal hit. And we were like, oh, my goodness, we were just, introducing our child to this, both of our children to this person who's completely, a monster on social media and in the news. And then we had to discuss how that can happen. But then we did continue after that to show them, to take them to the offices and things like that, to take them to, in the United States, to Washington, D.C., to see where politics really happens. So they could make something that's very abstract concrete. And I would suggest that if parents can do that when their kids are young, make anything abstract concrete. And kids need to see and feel and touch in order to do that. And then I think that we're kind of guiding them in that way. Sorry, I got a little off topic with my story with my kids.
I feel like that is completely on topic. That is completely the answer that we're looking for. Now, what are the challenges? What were the challenges of sort of going through that process, other than them sort of not really starting to be interested in it? Are there any other challenges that sort of came across when you were trying to encourage that kind of interest in your children?
So it's so not cool to do things when you hit, 13 that your parents say that you should do. I mean, completely not cool. And my son used to say, oh my gosh, I'm going to be caught, which meant, his friends would see him out there doing these things. And so, part of that was saying, all right, well, we still, as a family, want to be civically engaged. So you can choose how you want to be civically engaged. And whatever that is, you get to pick it. And civic engagement is pretty broad. Voting and politics is just one arm of it. And so he decided that was the one that he would prefer, because he was going to be caught in whatever civic engagement we had him do. So both kids had to do that. That's something that we've lost. We've lost it in the United States. Civic engagement used to be part of the school system. It's long gone. Since I was a teenager, it was at the tail end of it. And that's part of why kids have there isn't as much excitement about politics. And there's more of a follower mentality, because we've lost, we maintain ourselves in sort of a silo. As opposed to seeing ourselves as part of the world. And you had mentioned, how can we get kids to feel like voting will make a difference and it will matter? Civic engagement does that. So if you're sending a child out, and politics is the area that you want to get them involved in, but they see someone campaigning, and they get involved in that level, they do there's phone banking and other things that people do. It makes you see concretely what goes into it and how it happens. And these are real people. They aren't, social media characters. And I use that term character purposely, because they often don't feel real to kids who are watching them.
Yeah, that's true. I think especially when it comes to volunteering as well, volunteering at soup kitchens. I think that's the biggest thing that my parents forced us to do. just going to soup kitchens and just going through and just talking with people who you don't normally get to meet.
That's civic engagement. Gold star for your parents.
We'll give that a virtual gold star for them then. So how do you think that this practice of sort of getting your children involved in civic duties, how do you think that that has impacted your family life and also their perception as to how life sort of goes on?
Well, I don't know how it was for you, but I can imagine that you had something to talk about with regard to that. You didn't come home and, if your child goes to school, here's a typical thing. How was your day? Good. What did you do? Nothing. That's not atypical. But if you're doing something like you were with the volunteering in the soup kitchen, or, even if it's complaining, that's still a conversation. So whatever it is, that is going to get you dialoguing with your parents in a way that's different, because everybody knows what was going on, essentially. They knew you were there. There are certain activities involved in that. They know what kind of questions to ask. Did you meet anybody? What conversations did you have? Was there anybody that was particularly kind or interesting? Did you like the people you were working with? There's a whole host of questions that you can engage in and use as ways to dialogue that make it exciting.
Okay, perfect. Now, this leads us in really well with the next section of our show, which is the open mic. Now, this gives you a chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about, or maybe something that you want to promote on our show today. So in the last minute or so, I'd love to give you the floor and get you to share what's on your mind with us today.
Well, my big thing is mentorship. And a lot of what we were talking about, is parents sort of mentoring their kids, right? Being role models, modeling behavior. And the thing that I really think is so important for kids is to be able to have great mentors. And the organization that I run is the Mentor Project, mentorproject.org. And we offer free mentorship from people from astronauts to well-known artists, and to mentor kids for free around the world. So I really do hope that people think of mentorship as something that they should be both doing, mentoring, and that people that don't have a mentor should have a mentor. And when I say a mentor, I really mean 10. Like, have as many as you can have. You can never have too many. And so that's my passion. Go check out mentorproject.org.
Perfect. I'll have those down. I'll have that link down below as well if I've ever to go into, because I think that's such an interesting aspect to get into. And I think that's what a lot of kids have sort of lost. They're forced to sort of see either their parents or their teachers or maybe the volunteer leader as their mentor, but to have a set mentor who actually knows how to be a mentor rather than just, okay, I'm a person and you can look up to me if you choose to do so. It's a very different kind of development when you have that mentor who they know that their role is to be a mentor, and that's their main role, to sort of be there to guide. Rather than, like, if you go to a parent, the parent is easy to make mistakes. A teacher can easily make a mistake. Their role it's not their assigned job role to be a mentor, it's to teach something. But mentors are very different to teachers. I'm sort of learning that along the way, that mentor and teachers are two completely different things.
Different. If you're paid to do something, you're not a mentor. A teacher can be a mentor if they're doing it outside of their role as a teacher. And parents, they're supposed to be doing it. You don't get praise for sort of taking care of and loving your children. But a mentor who is dedicated to you, who really has you in mind and wants to see you succeed or wants to answer your questions, that is a very special bond and a special feeling that a person can have. So I do hope that we can get back to mentoring, because mentoring is free, and those who mentor are giving a piece of themselves, their expertise, to someone else to hold and carry along. So it's a legacy that every mentor is leaving.
Yeah. And I really hope that we somehow bring that into schools and bring that as a normal normal thing for like a normal person. Okay, I'm a mentor, and not just for a career, but being as a person, being a mentor, like someone that they can find themselves looking up to, who's set to look after you, that individual student, rather than a whole group of people that they're set to just reply to their emails or reply to letters or things. Like they're able to be one-on-one with a student, or be one-on-one with someone that they can find themselves looking up to. I feel like that should be something that in schools, it's such a normal and practical way of development.
As of right now, students can do that. They can get that for free through the Mentor Project. So it doesn't even, they can, there's just I want a mentor button, become a mentee button. That's all they have to do. And they can get one. Yeah, easy.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm definitely adding that link down below. I feel like that's something everyone needs to know. Now, as regards to your work and what other work that you've done, if our listeners want to find out a little bit more about that, or even about you, is there a place that they're able to go to?
Sure. You can find my writing on Psychology Today, The Right Side of 40. I also have another area where I write called The Right Side of 40. And you can find me on my website, deborahheiser.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Deborah Heiser, PhD. And you can find me at the Mentor Project, mentorproject.org.
Okay, perfect. I'll have all those links down below as well, because I think everyone needs to access them, and makes it easy for everyone to just click of a button away to finding a little bit more about not just your work, but the Mentor Project and the other work that you do as well. So thank you so much, Deborah, for joining me on the show today. It was amazing talking about this and talking about how we can get teenagers a little bit more interested in civic responsibility and at least know what that means.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure talking with you. I love the topic.
Amazing. Now, I hope you guys learned as much as I did when it comes to this, and I'll see you all in the next episode.
You've been listening to Raising Parents, the Parenting Science Insights podcast, produced by the Parenting Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so that we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pa.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Dina Sargeant. Thanks for tuning in.